Applauses, of course. Let's warmly welcome Linas.
Thank you, Odetta.
Good luck.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? All right, so good morning. I hope everyone's awake. You had your coffee. I'll do my best not to put you to sleep. By show of hands, how many here manufacture or produce a product that you sell or want to sell? Okay, a couple. So most of you are resellers. Good, you picked the right room. How many of you sell in the US market online now? Okay, 2, 3. Okay. All right, good. This is exciting. So I'm going to try to convince some people, I guess. All right, so omni-channel sales in general, why is it important? I mean, other than the common sense things like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, you want to diversify, you want to mitigate risks. But beyond that, I guess there are only two things that will increase the valuation of your business at exit more than having an omni-channel sales strategy. And those things are a subscription type business, if you have a lot of subscribers, and your brand following, how big your brand is. So omni-channel sales strategy is number 3 in getting more multiples on your EBITDA when you actually decide to exit from your brand or your business if you choose to do so. So a little bit about us, who we are. So we started the company in 1996 in the US, and we have 4 business units within our company. The first one is international sourcing, so we represent primarily East Asian manufacturers in the North American market. We sell engineered components, steel, plastic, glass, rubber, and we sell them to major US industries like automotive, aerospace, appliance manufacturers, and so on. We also have a 3PL business, so we have warehouses in Chicago, in LA, and we warehouse our own product, we warehouse our customers' products, and we fulfill B2B and B2C orders. We also have a service called North America Market Entry. This is where we find gems or brands that we see a lot of potential in the US market, and we bring them to the North American market. We help them enter, we sell. I mean, we can do everything from essentially being an outsourced commercial department. And the last division of our business is e-commerce, which is the newest piece of our business, and that's where we create our own brands and we launch our own products, today primarily for sale in the US market, but planning to scale globally as well. All right, so just to show you that we actually do the things that we talk about, this is a quick snapshot of all of the sales channels where we sell our products. So as you can see, anything from national retailers, brick and mortar stores, to distributors, independent retailers, the global original equipment manufacturers, this is where our component business is at, and then of course all of the e-commerce platforms, primarily again focused on the US market. All right, so let's talk about the US market. Over $7 trillion in retail sales in 2022. It's a number that's hard to wrap your head around. But a number that's even harder to wrap your head around, I think, is that 2022 was the first year where e-commerce sales went over $1 trillion in the US. I had to look it up. It's actually, a trillion has 12 zeros. It's a pretty big number. So all of CPG goods or consumer packaged goods are sold via either offline sales channels or online sales channels, right? Your typical offline sales channels would be, a retailer, a store, wholesale, or distribution that sells into those offline sales channels. Your typical online sales channels will be, B2B sales channels, B2C sales channels, and D2C, which is actually a subset of B2C. So we'll focus on the online for the sake of this, for the rest of this presentation. One slide about B2B sales, because I think most of you are interested in D2C sales. And the reason I have this up here, I mean, Alibaba, everybody knows about. I don't need to talk about them, but that's a great example of a B2B e-commerce site globally, right? Faire is a site that I'd like to point out. To many, it's not very well known outside of the US, but it's a phenomenal fairly new business. They really exploded during the pandemic. I think their valuation in the, over the last 3 years has grown to something like $12 billion in the U.S. marketplace. We're approaching $500,000 in sales on that platform. And essentially what this is, it's a very good replacement for physical trade shows, which is the reason why they blew up during the pandemic when the trade shows were not happening. So basically, they introduce producers of products to retail-oriented buyers. Tundra is very similar to Fair with a little bit different of a twist. I look at them as, Fair being the Uber and Tundra being the Lyft, kind of following in their footsteps. All right, so now let's talk about B2C, or D2C in some cases. So this is how we look at the different tiers of B2C sales channels, especially in the North American setting. Most commonly known, most ubiquitous reseller platforms. I'm sure none of them are new to you. Amazon, eBay, Walmart, Etsy. Wayfair is that last logo. The next tier is your own branded website. Again, nothing revolutionary here. Some businesses are suited for that, some are not. Social e-commerce, huge, from Facebook to Insta, Google, TikTok. TikTok Shop is worth mentioning. In 2022, they crossed $250 billion in sales in China, and they officially launched TikTok Shop just in the last couple of years in China. They've been piloting this TikTok Shop in the US this year, and it's done so well that they actually are currently launching it officially. I think they're upwards of $10 million in sales. So huge. I mean, if you're targeting that audience and you're not doing anything on TikTok, I think you're missing the boat. The fourth sort of tier in the sales channels in the US is the traditional national retailers. Target, Macy's, Kroger, those are home improvement stores like Home Depot, Lowe's. So what happened here is over the last few years, these retailers have traditionally sold online only things that are sold in their stores, right? And they've been watching all of the e-commerce platforms, and they're saying, hey, we're missing the boat by not allowing third-party resellers on our platforms. So they started to do so within the last couple of years. So all of these major retailers already have huge traffic going to their e-commerce stores, but at the same time now they allow third-party resellers to set up and to sell products on their e-commerce stores that are not sold in their physical stores. Now, it's a lot more challenging to get set up there. It's not like Amazon or Walmart where you just pop up your listing, register for seller account, and you can sell. You actually have to get an approval. You have to be an approved vendor. You got to go through the process. So this might take you 6 months to get a yes or a no, whether you fit their strategy. But it's not really costing anything for you to go through the process. So I suggest looking into that if you have a product that fits that consumer. And then the last one is your niche dropship model, like specialty stores, catalogs, referrals, influencers. So, I mean, let's take a simple, specialty stores. No one would think much of it, right? But in the U.S., let's say, for example, there's a, museum store association in the U.S. It has thousands of museums. Some of the major museums like the Met in New York or the Institute of Art in Chicago, they do millions and millions of dollars on their e-commerce platforms. However, those specialty stores, they are not in the business of owning inventory and then reselling it. However, they will list your product on their website if you're able to drop ship it. Of course, it has to meet their criteria and their standards and all that kind of stuff. But again, a huge sales channel that you should be taking advantage or looking at if you have a product that fits that consumer. All right, so what are the key factors that determine the sales channel strategy, right? Who you're going to sell to and how you're going to go about it. So number one is your brand strategy, right? There are plenty of resellers in the world that simply source something and sell it without adding any value to it. And that's great. There's gazillions of dollars to be made doing that. Amazon is full of those types of resellers. It's a great business model if you have some kind of a competitive advantage on, getting your listing better, optimizing your keywords better, whatever the case is. However, if you have a long-term game with growing your brand, that should dictate to you a bit of a different sales channel strategy. Your product fit, like I mentioned before, there are some channels or some platforms like, there are some things you can sell on Etsy that you will not sell on Walmart. It's just, it's just common sense. Profit structure. So your typical Amazon profit structure understanding is, a quarter of your sales price has to be your cost of goods, a quarter goes to the platform, a quarter goes to marketing and advertising, and then the quarter is your profit, right? So if you're built that way for that particular sales channel, great. However, if you want to scale into other sales channels, you might have to adjust that profitability strategy because you might be able to do it with less, or you might need to do it with more because you have to involve additional logistics operations, or you have to work with a retailer that's got a higher margin, whatever the case is. So that's a big consideration to look at when you're deciding which sales channel to go after. Your advertising strategy, same thing. Are you strictly PPC oriented and that's all you know and that's all you care about? Or are you willing to go out and engage in other forms of digital advertising and marketing? Are you going to scale your brand via social marketing? So those things will also help you steer towards your consumer and which sales channel you're going to go into. And of course, your product delivery method, which is actually what we're going to focus on for the rest of this presentation. So how does your product get to your customers? There are essentially three main ways that your consumer gets your product. So self-fulfillment, right? Starting a business out of your apartment, migrating into a garage, going into a warehouse once it scales. That's one way, self-fulfillment. Another way is platform-enabled fulfillment. So FBA is the holy grail for a lot of sellers, right? They solve a lot of problems. They warehouse your product. They fulfill your orders. Walmart fulfillment services, same thing. eBay tried to do it a couple of times. They weren't as successful. So that's another way, is the platform where you're selling your product actually does the fulfillment, the warehousing and fulfillment for you. The third way is third-party fulfillment operations. So Amazon kind of figured out that that's a nice area to go into to help sellers sell omni-channel, so why not take a piece of that pie and let's help them do it from our own distribution centers. So that's what FBA multi-channel is. ShipBop is a good example of a national 3PL in the US with dozens of distribution centers that pretty much can reach any corner of the market. And POI, it's an example of our little business where we say we are big enough to service your needs nationally, but we're small enough to be nimble and attentive to your needs and your business requirements. Next few slides are going to be very practical from our experience, what we hear from our customers, our own customers, our customers' customers. So I'm just going to run through these without commenting too much about this, and then we're going to talk about it afterwards. So U.S. consumer objections. If you don't fulfill from the U.S., I don't trust it. Common reason why shopping carts get abandoned. You have too many bad reviews related to late deliveries. Again, international deliveries can be tricky, especially in the fourth quarter. It takes too long to receive the order. Products are out of stock. We all know how painful it is to go out of stock on a listing that you've just dumped a whole bunch of money into optimizing and ranking and so on and so forth. I want to buy from the brand directly. That's becoming a trend, actually. It's all about supporting small business and things like that. So now going from consumer to seller challenges on the flip side, right? A lot of sellers are pigeonholed into the Amazon sales channel or a Walmart sales channel, and primarily because of FBA. Like I said, FBA is an awesome thing if that is your long-term game, but it's got its limitations. Amazon replenishment. How many of the sellers have dealt with not being able to replenish the inventory levels that they would like because they don't have the prior sales history to substantiate it, and Amazon's trying to reduce their inventory capacity at their warehouses or fulfillment centers, so they will allow you a small quantity to be replenished. So we see a lot of sellers replenishing on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. Sell only on Etsy because I can fulfill directly from my home country. So again, this is sort of a niche in the e-commerce sales where you're looking for either a sales channel or a logistics solution that allows you to ship products, drop ship directly from where you're manufacturing or where you have the product to the consumer. So that one was about the sales channel. This is about the actual product, right? So sometimes sellers are forced to sell small, light, small volume things just because they can get under some threshold of so many kilos or pounds and send it via USPS or whatever the case is. Selling via US branded sites seems too complex. It's true, it's a completely different business model, but again, if you are building a brand, I don't think you can ignore this as a diversification piece of your business. I don't have a solution for processing returns. A lot of sellers are dealing with this problem, right? So Amazon gives you a choice of, hey, we can send the returns back to you, which is, of course, extremely costly if you're fulfilling from your home country, or we can evaluate the resellability of your return and make a determination where we put it back in stock or we put it in the trash. So I can tell you from experience, 90% of those products go into trash because that's much quicker to evaluate that way. We actually accept the returns from Amazon into our own warehouse, and 9 times out of 10, that return comes back to us unopened. It's never even been touched. Simply people go on emotional shopping sprees, they take advantage of Black Friday or whatever the case is, and then they just change their minds and they return things. I don't know how to navigate the US sales tax. That can be intimidating, and it's very specific to the sales channel, right? Some platforms will collect the sales tax on your behalf, especially if you have a nexus. Actually, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this. There's going to be a great presentation later today from One Stop Bot about this, so you can listen to that. How many sellers source products from China, bring them to their home country just to drop ship it to the US? It happens way too often. To me, it's amazing how they can still be competitive, but it happens all day long. This is more pertinent to people that make their own product, because usually somebody who's manufacturing, they're looking for sales avenues, not just on D2C, but also B2B. So a lot of times they will start entering the market into the physical sales channels, and then they want to launch their own e-commerce sites, and then they find themselves the need to work with a different 3PL partner who specializes in B2C rather than just B2B. Importer of record is important. This is primarily a concern for people that are selling a product that is regulated by FDA, EPA, USDA, food, cosmetics, drugs, things like that. So when you start dealing with products like that, then you can still be the importer of your own product without having a legal entity in the US. However, you have to have a local agent that assures the safety of your product. All right, so 70% of all shopping carts are abandoned. This is from Shopify last year. And guess what? The rate of shopping carts that are abandoned by international sellers is even greater than that. In 2022, e-commerce returns hit $279 billion. So I showed you before the slide that said that U.S. has crossed over $1 trillion in sales. This represents a quarter of all of those sales as returns. I mean, if you ask my wife, she thinks it should be 50%, and that's okay, but that's a different story for a different day. But anyway, that's just amazing. If you don't have a returns solution, I mean, first and foremost, you should be optimizing your listing, your product, your instructions, your marketing to make sure that the customer is not surprised by anything when they get that product, so it's less likely to be returned. So that's number one. Number two, if they are returned, you should have a sound way of dealing with those returns, especially if your product is expensive. It's just the reality we live in. Such a consumer society driven by instant gratification. We want everything now, and especially in the U.S., this trend is very, very, very strong. Groceries, it says one day here, it's actually 2 hours. No one's got the patience to wait for their eggs or milk any more than 2 hours. So international drop-shipped fulfillment is not even a feasible option for groceries. All right, so how to select the right 3PL partner? Now, these are going to be some fluffy things, intangible things, but from our experience, they're extremely important when you are selecting the right 3PL partner. Someone that has the experience with your sales channels, this might be a bit more important for B2B sellers because when it comes to B2C, I mean, fulfilling orders to Amazon, Etsy, Wayfair, Walmart, I mean, it's fairly standard. They just pick, pack, ship to the consumer, and that's it. When it comes to B2B, whether it's distributors or brick and mortar stores, they have very specific requirements with delivery appointments, palletizing, labeling, packaging, so on and so forth. So your 3PL should be familiar with those. Of course, offers competitive 3PL and shipping pricing. You have to compete. There's no other way. Has a concentration of international clients. That's a very big one because it's very different to be working with a customer who wants to warehouse their products in your warehouse when that customer is a domestic company versus when that customer is an overseas company. Because you have to deal with customs clearance, you have to deal with a lot of issues related to labeling, to packaging compliance, and most of the problems do occur with goods that are shipped from overseas just because they're not in tune as much as the domestic companies are. So if you have a problem with your labeling compliance, let's say, and you will, it's just the nature of the beast, having a 3PL that will work with you to relabel it or to help you repackage it or whatever the case is, it really helps reduce the cost, because in other cases all of that stuff needs to either go back or be destroyed or whatever the case is, but whatever the US Customs tells you to do. Takes time to understand your business, offers personalized solutions. So again, the 3PL business, especially on the national level in the US, has gotten to the point where there are robots climbing the walls and picking products, and if you want somebody to package that product in a tissue paper that is, branded with your logo, or tape that box with your branded tape, or wrap it extra layer of some bubble wrap because it's a fragile piece of china. It's impossible to do that with the national 3PLs because they simply don't care. The product is thrown into a box, sometimes 5 times larger than the product, and it goes to the consumer, rattling and all of that. This is extremely important. Once you land your inventory into a 3PL, I guarantee you next day, next week, you will have questions. You will want to know things about that inventory. And if you are unable to reach that person who physically, I'm not talking about a bot, but a person who can physically go out there and look at your lot number or at your date expiration or whatever the need is, you have to have that live communication. And somebody who's willing to grow with you. If you are just a very tiny fish in a huge conglomerate, no one's going to care about your needs as you start selling into the new sales channel, because those needs might be different. You might have to package the product differently. You might have to label it differently. You might have to kit it differently. So if you don't have somebody who understands those needs and helps you grow with them together, it's going to be very tough. All right, so I think the takeaway here is that all of those sales channels that I mentioned are achievable, attainable, realistic. However, what makes it all possible, first and foremost, is localizing inventory in the market where your customers are. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let's do one more round of applause. Come on, it was such an amazing speech. I mean, Linas, it was really good. And you just mentioned, localizing inventory. And I have a question. So, money. And so how to determine that price of localizing inventory in US market, and specifically, to be more specifically?
Good question. So when you think of shipping inventory to a 3PL that's going to be able to fulfill your orders to multiples of sales channels, there are basically 2 different categories. One is the 3PL costs, and another one is the shipping costs of your product to your customer. So the 3PL costs generally consists of inbound receiving, warehousing, and outbound shipping. Those are the 3 main costs. And then the shipping cost is just basically whatever the service level or the carrier that you want to use, UPS, FedEx, post office. So I would say do an apples-to-apples comparison between the 3PLs on their 3PL fees, and then do an apples-to-apples comparison of shipping it from a specific zip code to all the 7 different shipping zones in the US, and see what different 3PLs tell you, because markup on freight is a real income generator for 3PLs. I've seen markups on freight upwards of 80, 90%. But as a general rule, from our customers warehousing the product with us, I would say that you should be able to fit within 10% of the sales price of your product, adding a 3PL into that equation.
Okay, so it's still, I can hear a bit of positivity. I mean, you talked a lot of opportunities, you shared a lot of opportunities. But let me also ask, so what are weaknesses of Omni-Channel? We should have some,
Yeah, of course, there are pros and cons.
Come here,
pros and cons to everything. So it's a risk, right? It's an investment. Anytime you fulfill your own inventory from your own location, you can produce less. You don't have to, especially if you have a perishable product that's got an expiration date, putting it out there in some warehouse and hoping that you'll be able to sell through that inventory. That's just a risk, a business risk that you have to take on. I would say also not being spread too thin, right? Concentration on one sales channel with specific consumers, specific marketing and advertising strategy can also be very effective as opposed to trying to be all things to all people. So again, it's not the right fit for all businesses, but certainly should be considered.
Okay. Do we have any questions in the audience? Because you should also not forget that we can use and scan QR codes here, to go to the website and to ask questions. Do we have any? If not, I have a last. So you mentioned, and you said, niches, It's like someone is saying, niche, we are saying niches. And we're just saying riches are in the niches. So what do you think that, is it true? I mean, or do you agree that exactly like the riches are in the niches? Or we should consider also some different things?
I can give you, I guess, a real-world example. Again, we're just very practical, right? So we have a Lithuanian manufacturer of a gift product that started working with us maybe 8 years ago, and we sell that product in about 2,500 different independent retailers. So boutique independent retail is as niche as it gets, right? Because they're extremely spread out geographically, very hard to reach in person, to sell to them. So the only way we were able to achieve that is through developing a rep network of, I think we have 85 different reps that call on all of those different shops.
Influencers or representatives?
Representatives.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, a different type of, but that's a good example of selling into a niche sales channel without a massive national, advertising campaign or influencer, campaign is through a rep network. Is just one example.
Cool. I love it because I also have some friends who really are riches and niches doing some business. So thank you so much, Linas.
Thank you, guys.